Greetings, regular viewers of Ruslan Belov. Once again, I have prepared the very latest news for you. I kindly ask you to support my work by subscribing to the channel, and I am very interested to know where you are watching me from. Please write it in the comments. And now let us move on to the most important things. Over the past 24 hours, an incident occurred in the Gulipole area that can be considered one of the most unsuccessful episodes for the Ukrainian armed forces in recent times. A Ukrainian assault column attempted to break deep into defensive lines, advancing almost 4 kilometers, but was quickly detected by Russian FPV drone units. At that moment, the column came under intense fire and aerial strikes. The losses turned out to be significant, and what is especially noteworthy is that not long ago, it was Russian forces that suffered setbacks during assaults in this very area. In a sense, the situation has turned completely upside down. Let us clearly examine why this assault near Gulipole was practically doomed from the very beginning. Video footage has arrived from this region showing Russian forces destroying Ukrainian armored vehicles, including tanks. Let us take a look at this footage. As you can see, Russian FPV drones detected the movement of Ukrainian armored vehicles and, while they were on the move, delivered precise strikes, destroying both the equipment and the landing troops. After that, the Ukrainian troops who had dismounted were also eliminated. This video cannot be published on YouTube, so the full version can be viewed on our Telegram channel, the link to which is provided in the description. From the footage, it is clear that Ukrainian armored vehicles were moving toward the settlements of Sladkoye and Ravnopolie, and it can be said right away that an assault in these directions was ineffective from the outset. Let me remind you that after the capture of Uspianovka, Russian forces advanced toward Gulipole. For a long time, the Ukrainian armed forces were unable to take Uspianovka, and now they attempted to move in that direction themselves. Even if Ukrainian forces had managed to gain a foothold in Sladkoye or Ravnopolie, they would not have been able to reach Uspianovka, since these positions have long been controlled by Russian forces, and the Ukrainian military would no longer be able to capture them. As a result, all assault groups were destroyed, and the territory marked in yellow is now in a so-called grey zone, meaning it is not controlled by either Russian or Ukrainian forces. Several days ago, Russian troops attempted to storm Dobrapole and suffered heavy losses. A large number of personnel were destroyed there. Despite recent statements claiming that Dobrapole had been fully captured, information from various sources remains contradictory. The coming days will clarify whether Dobrapole is under full Russian control or if it remains under Ukrainian control. As for Gulipole, the Ukrainian armed forces continue to bring in reserves to the area of Zaliznyk and attempt attacks in the direction of Gulipole. However, all their assault groups have been destroyed, and they have achieved no success. It is also worth noting changes on the map in the Steanogorsk area. One of the videos from this region shows Russian forces being attacked by FPV drones. At present, all territory marked in red is fully controlled by the Russian army. The Russian Ministry of Defense has officially stated that Steanogorsk is under full control, but so far there has been no completely reliable information confirming the total capture of this settlement. Confirming data has been arriving gradually, and today a video was published showing that the western part of Steanogorsk is under Russian control. When we talk about Gulipole and Steanogorsk, it is important to understand that the situation on other sections of the front looks different. For example, in the Seusk area, the Ukrainian armed forces have achieved tactical successes, and this cannot be ignored. Let us now turn our attention to Seusk. Video footage has arrived from this area showing forward positions of the Ukrainian military. Earlier, reports stated that Russian forces had taken the settlement of Pokrovskoye under full control. Today, new video materials have arrived confirming developments in this area. The territory marked in yellow is now fully controlled by the Ukrainian armed forces, which allows us to conclude that Pokrovskoye is no longer fully under Russian control. This settlement appears to be in a grey zone. FPV drone strikes have also been carried out against Ukrainian positions in this area, and as a result, information from both sides remains contradictory. Let us move on to Pokrovsk. I remind you that Pokrovsk, Mirnograd and Rodinskoye have come under full control of the Russian army, but the situation here is not so straightforward. The Ukrainian armed forces were preparing for an assault on Pokrovsk, and armored equipment had been readied for this purpose. However, Russian reconnaissance detected the concentration of Ukrainian equipment and destroyed it, preventing the offensive. There were also reports that Ukrainian equipment was destroyed in the area of Druzhkovka. This settlement was also being prepared as a staging area for assault operations, but the equipment there was detected and destroyed as well. Now let us move on to Kupyansk, which is currently one of the most controversial and key directions. If the Ukrainian attack near Gulipole failed, the situation around Kupyansk looks much more complex and ambiguous. There were statements about a grey zone in this region, followed by information from the Russian Ministry of Defense claiming that the city is being held. The next 72 hours will show how successful the Russian counterattack was and whether Russian forces will be able to stabilize the front line in Kupyansk. Let me remind you that elite Ukrainian units were sent to this sector to carry out assault operations against Kupyansk. The Ukrainian command is trying to demonstrate that the front line is stable and that the Ukrainian armed forces are achieving some successes. Despite the expansion of the Russian control zone, the territory marked in yellow has been lost. Russian sources claim that the Ukrainian armed forces will not be able to hold this territory, and it appears that Russian forces are not advancing here either. Let us summarize. Increasingly frequent reports indicate that Russian forces are conducting assault operations toward Kondratovka and Andreevka, as well as expanding their control zone in the direction of Mariino. In Andreevka itself, Russian forces have apparently already taken most of the settlement under their control. Ukrainian sources claim that this area is still under Ukrainian control, but this is not confirmed from the other side. What do you think is the most important direction at the moment, Kupyansk or Gulipole? Share your opinion in the comments. And now I would like to talk about yesterday's high-profile negotiations between Trump and Zelensky. It would be better to make a deal right now. This was the advice Donald Trump gave to the head of the Kiev regime following the talks. This raises the question, what exactly did Zelensky hope to convince the White House leader of? What were the real outcomes of this meeting, and how did it clearly demonstrate the presence of coordinated positions between Russia and the United States? On the night of Sunday, December 28, Moscow time, Donald Trump held talks with Vladimir Zelensky. The American leader approached the organization of these negotiations in a very thorough and deliberate manner. First of all, even before meeting with the Ukrainian side, Trump contacted Moscow and held a conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin. By doing so, he made it clear whom he considers the key participant in the process of resolving the Ukrainian crisis. It is essentially with Putin that the basic conditions are discussed, which are then conveyed to Kyiv. This assessment was given in a comment to the newspaper Vzglyad by Dmitry Suslov, Deputy Director of the Center for Comprehensive European and International Studies at the Higher School of Economics. As noted by Russian presidential aide Yuri Ushakov, the conversation between the leaders of Russia and the United States took place in a constructive, friendly and business-like atmosphere, and demonstrated a mutual desire to move toward a long-term peaceful settlement of the Ukrainian conflict. It is also important that during this conversation, common approaches on a number of fundamental issues were outlined, and it was precisely these positions that Donald Trump later presented to Zelensky. The second symbolic moment was the way the Ukrainian leader was received at the airport. Not a single representative of the top US leadership met Zelensky at the aircraft ramp. He was greeted only by staff from the Ukrainian embassy. This gesture sent a clear signal. Washington does not view the head of the Kiev regime as a global-scale figure and is not prepared to tolerate demonstrative behavior either behind closed doors during negotiations or at public events. The effect was noticeable. During his interaction with the press, Zelensky, standing next to Trump, read from a prepared text and behaved in a highly restrained manner. At the same time, he failed to secure Trump's support for the so-called 20-point peace plan that Kiev is promoting. On the other hand, Trump was also unable to persuade Zelensky to agree to the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from Donbas, a territory that Russia considers its own. However, the American president made it unmistakably clear that Ukraine will not be able to hold these lands in the long term. Moreover, as early as January, Kiev's negotiating position is likely to weaken even further. Russia will continue liberating new territories, and Europe will once again demonstrate its inability to take decisive steps in support of the Kiev regime. Perhaps this will eventually make the Ukrainian side more inclined toward compromise. Understanding this, neither Moscow nor especially Washington are in any rush. If everything goes really well, maybe a few weeks. If everything goes badly, longer, Donald Trump said, outlining the possible time frame for reaching peace agreements. And while both Russian and American leaders agree that the parties are closer to resolving the conflict in Ukraine and that negotiations have entered their final phase, forcing Russia to accept unfavorable terms cannot be the price of peace, no matter how many % remain until final peace agreements are reached. These are my conclusions and reflections following this meeting. And I thank you for watching. I wish everyone good health and peaceful skies overhead. Subscribe and see you again soon.